see. Hi guys!
I'm Joy.
And I'm Jess. We're here to do chocolate chip cookies today for live cooking on Tuesdays. So we're going to start by just kind of introducing some of the ingredients, washing our hands, and getting the oven all set to go. Hopefully you guys are ready to follow along. We posted the ingredients earlier. If not, this will be on Facebook later and you can totally join in. But also, please remember to ask your parents before doing this or be doing this with a parent along with it. Don't just do it by yourself. It is cooking after all.
Yes. So first we're going to preheat the oven.
So the recipe we're using calls for the oven to be at 375. So normally it will start at 350. We'll just move it right up and hit start. This should take probably about 10 minutes, and then we'll head in and we'll go ahead and wash our hands real quick because we're about to handle food. Since the coronavirus is going around, make sure to go ahead and keep your hands nice and clean. Super, super important. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and we'll show all the ingredients we're using. So again, we're using white flour. We're gonna use a cup of butter, 2 eggs, vanilla extract, some chocolate chips, baking soda, brown sugar, regular sugar, and I also got canola oil spray. If you don't have this kind of a spray, you can also use like vegetable oil or olive oil and just drip a little bit onto the baking pan and just spread it around with a paper towel. I'm just going to spray this right on here so it's all ready to go when we're ready to put the cookies down. So the first thing we need to do, the recipe calls for the butter to be melted. So we're going to take the butter and we're going to put it into a microwave safe dish. And I'm just going to drop it right in there. Make sure I get all the paper off. And I like to do it for like 30 seconds at a time. I don't like to overdo it. So it's not super hot when we're doing it. So we'll take it for 30 seconds at a time. And so the first thing we're also going to do is it's going to be melted butter with the brown sugar and the regular sugar. And we're going to whisk that all together. So in the meantime, we can start measuring some of that together while the butter is melting. See if we can set this up. All right. Maybe not there.
Here we go. That looks like a good spot.
Yep, perfect.
Okay, so do we need the whisk?
We have the whisk right over here.
Oh, we lost the whisk. That's a problem.
So I just took out the butter after 30 seconds. It still obviously needs a little more time, so I'm going to do another 30 while we work on this. And Joy's gone ahead to wash her hands while we'll get ready for the next step. So I don't know how familiar everybody is with brown sugar, but it can be sometimes really difficult to work with. I do recommend it's called the sugar bear. That's what I leave inside my brown sugar. You can get it at like a local cookie shop or probably on Amazon. It helps keep the brown sugar from getting really hard. If your brown sugar is gotten really hard, one of the ways that I like to do it is take a damp paper towel and put it over a bowl of what I'm about to use, and it'll help loosen it up. That normally takes a little bit longer, but it's a good method for doing that. So our butter is all melted, so if you want to go ahead and you can dump that right in there.
Right. Dumping the butter.
So that's 1 cup of butter. Fantastic. And then we need 1 cup of light brown sugar. So another thing I like to do is I like to scoop it in with just like a regular spoon because you need to pack it into this. So as you go, you want to pack it down. You want to go ahead and do that, so I'll let you do that.
Gotta make sure I don't scoop out the sugar bear by accident. So if you're just logging on, I just want to repeat this. Make sure that before you're doing any of this, that you've asked a parent and they've given you permission, or they're doing it with you.
Okay.
This is harder than it looks, I'm telling you.
But it's really important that we get the exact amount of brown sugar that you want in there. It's a super important piece of the cookie itself.
So Jess, I have a question for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do chocolate chip cookies normally have brown sugar in them? Because I've never heard of that.
Most recipes do call for it. Every recipe I've ever used has brown sugar. I think it gives it a great flavor. But I'm sure there are some recipes out there that don't use it.
Interesting. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of a chocolate chip cookie recipe with brown sugar, but that's new information for me.
It's very cool.
I
It's
like
nice
it.
to try new recipes.
You never know what's in stuff, I guess, until you make it yourself.
So while Joy's doing that, I'm also gonna take out. We need 3/4 of a cup. So we don't have a 3/4 cup measuring thing, but we have a 1/4 cup. So I'm gonna do 3 of these of regular sugar, which is the granulated sugar. Just so we can measure that out. So I just like to dip it right into my big thing of sugar, which I know you can't see because of the camera's a bit small. And then measure it out. I usually take another spoon or something to flatten it out, and I'm just gonna move this over so you can see what I did. So that there's not too much and there's not too little in it, but I don't want to use my fingers either, so I just like this, just to flatten it out. And then I'm gonna do this 3 times. And throw that right in with the butter.
How's this looking, Jess?
That looks pretty good to me.
This is what it looks like, all patted down. Should be pretty flat across the top, like Jess said, with the granulated sugar. Dump it in?
Yep, go for it.
Perfect.
And so I'm working on my last one of this to get my 3/4 of a cup in. And now that we've got all of those in there, we can start whisking it all together.
All right, should I whisk?
Go for it.
All right, I'm not sure if I'm gonna have a good technique at this. Jess is kind of the master of this recipe, not me. So, we'll see. Normally for a whisk, you kind of go like this, and I don't want to fling stuff everywhere, but like that. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do. It's looking pretty interesting. Here, I'll show you. But if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments while we're cooking, and we'll try to get to them. Because I know I have a lot of questions because I'm not normally one to bake.
And the nice thing about using the whisk is that it really gets all the pieces in there. You can use a wooden spoon. I found that the whisk works better. You can also use a mixing spoon or one of the electric mixers if you have them. I don't feel like for this one you necessarily need to because it's not something that's super sticky, so it will just whip up pretty good. Oh, and we just see that Matt has put on as a comment, I'll give you $500 for some of those cookies later. So maybe we'll share with Matt. We haven't decided yet.
I hope they're worth $500. They seem like they will be. They smell good. It smells like brown sugar.
All right, so that's
getting
good. Yep, that's getting whipped up pretty good. So the next step is going to be to add the eggs and the vanilla. So when it comes to eggs, I like to pull over, if I can, I like to pull my trash can over right next to it so I can throw the egg right out. So yeah, this looks awesome. So if you haven't seen it yet,
I'm proud of myself.
This is what yours should start looking like. I like to do 1 egg at a time, and like slowly mix it in. I think it makes it cook a little bit better. So, and the best way I find to do this is not to crack it on the side because it might crack shells right in. But if you crack it right on a flat surface, it kind of gives you a little bit of a play to open the egg right up. And then if you can drop it right in.
I have a question. What happens if you get shells in your mix? What do you do?
That's a hard one. I like to make sure my hands are as clean as possible, and then I typically just have to get right in there and pull them out. Not always the best option, but it's basically the only option. Go for it.
I have a tip. Something that I was taught. I don't know how well it always works in all recipes, but what I would do sometimes is if I get a little piece of shell in there, I take one of these halves and try to scoop it up with it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, depending on how thick your mixture is, but that's what I was taught. So whatever works best for you when you're cooking.
That's a great tip. Another thing too is once you've used eggs, if you get any of the egg yolk on your fingers, make sure to rinse off your hands, re-wash them however you want to do it. Just make sure you get it off your hands because you don't want to get that into your system at all. So let me just check the recipe again. So we're also going to add the vanilla in, which was, I just want to make sure, 2 teaspoons.
Let's see if I can. Nope.
We've got all of our stuff laid right out.
Teaspoon, yes. teaspoon. Teaspoon, if you're using these, would be TSP. Do not use, what's the other one? TSB? Is it BP? I think so. Yes, no, TBSP. Do not use that. Use TSP, teaspoon. All right, so we're just gonna throw in 2 of these. I like to get it just under it so it don't get too much. The vanilla is gonna give it a lot of really great flavor. I love putting vanilla in almost all of my cookies. Okay, and I'm just gonna throw this right in the sink so that we're not dirtying up the counter. And then we're gonna whisk this all together. So just the same thing. You want to be kind of gentle with it, especially with the size of the bowl that you might be using, so that it doesn't obviously fly out and get all over the place. Oh. And it's going to turn like the dark brown that you were looking at to a bit of a lighter brown. And I'm going to stop here because I don't want to overmix it because there's still more ingredients to put in. There's more ingredients?
Heck yeah, there is.
I didn't know how much went into chocolate chip cookies, let me tell you.
So the next thing is flour and baking soda. And again, I apologize, I'm not in the screen. I'm trying to read the recipe from the other side of the kitchen.
And yeah, if you have any questions or you didn't hear anything, feel free to put a comment in and we'll make sure that we address it.
Absolutely. And we'll be online throughout the day. We can answer any other questions if you do this later in the day. Or at least one of us will be.
Yeah, you can comment on this post that the live is still on, or you can send us a message and we'll make sure we get to it.
So similar to what I did with the granulated sugar, we're going to scoop out the flour to throw it in there. And we need about 2.5 cups of flour. So I'm going to start with the cups, and I'm just going to dip it right in here. And I like to kind of just shake it in my thing. It depends on what you're using, what might be easier for you. And then I'm gonna scoop it, or I'm gonna flatten it out again to make sure the measuring's good. And there's my one. And then I'm gonna scoop again. Again, this may be easier for you, like this might not be the way you have it set up if you're using it straight out of a bag. I recommend using a spoon just to scoop it in and then flatten it out. It'll help not create such a big mess. So that's our 2 cups, and we still need a half. So I'm gonna switch over to my half cup. Scoop it right in there, flatten it out, and then dump it right in. Alright, so the next thing was the baking soda, which we just need 1 teaspoon of. Luckily we have another 1 teaspoon. If you don't have another one, just make sure you rinse it out in the sink and just dry it off real good. If you don't dry it off really good, it's just going to get all stuck to the back of the teaspoon, and you're not going to get the amount that you, or the correct amount that you need actually in the baking solution. So it's just I think it just said 1 teaspoon? 1 teaspoon? So my baking soda has this little thing at the edge of it where I can I can scoop this in here, and then I can scrape it up against it to kind of make it flat. It's not always going to come out flat, so like with this one, I'm going to do it again. I'm trying to make it as flat as possible to get the correct amount. That's pretty good. And I'm just going to dump that right in there, and then we can start mixing again. Now this is one I probably wouldn't use the whisk anymore, because it's all just going to get stuck right in here. So I'm just going to make sure that it all gets in there, and then we can start mixing with a spoon. I just want to make sure I'm on. Oh, and then it also calls for a little bit of salt. I'm just going to shake in just a few seconds of this just to get it in there. You can measure it out as well if you'd like. It calls for, I believe, 1/4. It calls for a teaspoon of salt, so I'm going to throw in just a little bit more. Not everybody puts salt in their cookies. I don't typically, but some people like it, so I thought we would include it. So now we're just going to mix it all up. We're going to go pretty gently, because we don't want the flour to go everywhere. I like to flip the batter when I'm cooking like this, rather than just going around in circles. I think it will capture more of it, and it gets a lot of the dough that's sitting at the bottom. I don't know if we have any questions or anything, or if anyone's online currently. Oh,
we have a couple viewers, yeah.
Okay.
While we're mixing, now would be a great time if you have questions about anything at all, or even comments, anything, if you want to say anything. You don't have to. But We're just mixing it up now. It smells really good. I mean, I wish you could smell it through your computer, your phone, whatever you're using, but it does smell really good. And I bet it's gonna smell even better once it's in the oven, am I right?
Absolutely. And the nice thing is this is a fairly quick recipe, and it's a less complicated recipe. I've definitely done some cookies that they take quite a while, and there's lots of steps to them. And I always like making them from scratch. I feel like they taste really fresh. So this is probably good because I don't want to overmix it too much because we still have to fold in the chocolate chips. And I believe that is the rest of it. So it calls for 2 cups of chocolate chips. Typically that's a perfect size of a standard 10 to 12 ounce bag. So I'm not going to measure it out. It's okay to have a little extra or a little less, and we're just going to dump it right in there.
Ooh.
So Joy, do you want to fold it in there and I'll hold it?
I will fold. Oh yeah, here you go. I'm gonna.
Okay,
Perfect.
we're good.
Okay.
We're still good. We almost lost everybody.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. So Joy's just gonna fold those in, and that just requires just scooping it over and just kind of mixing it all together. We used these kind of chocolate chips, and they're actually mini chocolate chips. You can use big ones, you can use little ones. It's whatever you prefer. Mm-hmm. This is the ones we happen to have.
See, I prefer the mini ones because I think they're cute.
I think they're cute too. I think it also depends on the kind of cookie you're making, but these ones are fun. Also, another thing for next week, if you're thinking about it while we're cooking right now, if you have any ideas for what you want us to do over the next few weeks, please feel free to put those in the comments as well, so we can definitely accommodate what everybody wants us to try to cook for them and help throw out some awesome cooking tips. So that's looking pretty good. We're almost all set. And it looks like our oven is all set and preheated. The preheat word has gone away, so it looks like we're all set. And we're almost ready to start scooping onto the baking sheet. So I'm gonna flip us back around and put us back here. Perfect. All right, I'm just gonna clear some stuff out of the way.
Oh, this smells even better with the chocolate chips in it. You can smell the chocolate.
So good. So awesome.
Ah, perfect.
All right, so I'm gonna bring over this. Now, you remember before I said that I sprayed this cookie sheet. You don't always have to spray certain cookie sheets. I typically do because I don't want my cookies stuck to the bottom, but if you're using a non-stick cookie sheet, you should be okay. But for just like the sake that I don't want these stuck, I sprayed some down anyway. So a good way to do this is to take a tablespoon scooper, and actually there's 2 of them so we can both do it, which is awesome. And I like to just kind of scoop it and make it kind of like a heaping spoonful. And then I pull it out, and it's normally like just the perfect amount for how much it is. And I can just kind of roll it all together and kind of make like a ball. And it should be about like just about a 1-inch ball. If you feel like it's too big, like this one's a little bit big, you can just pull some of it off and put it back in the batter. And like this. And if you need to wash your hands again, if you feel like you should, Joy just did, which is a great idea. And then we're going to place it right down onto the cookie sheet.
Is this heaping enough?
That sounds perfect to me.
Heaping.
That looks perfect. And we're just going to keep going until we get this all onto our baking sheet.
This would be another great time to ask questions or make comments if you have any.
Ooh, we're losing chocolate chips.
Stop throwing chocolate chips at me, Jess.
And so I like to put them at least 1 to 2 or about 2 inches apart. So I should be able to get, if you're looking at my cookie sheet, I should be able to get 4 across the bottom and like 3 rows of 4 roughly. And it'll depend on the size of the cookie sheet that you're using, but since they will expand and they will move around, we want to make sure they have enough space so they don't get all stuck together.
We do not want any mutant cookies that are stuck together.
Nope.
I mean, they'll taste just as good, but
they will taste just as good. But we want to get them to cook right. So to continue with this, it does say to bake these for about 10 minutes. The edge, the center should be soft and the edges should be hardening quite a little bit. And they should be a little bit, if you picked it up with a spatula, they should look a little bit golden brown on the bottom. You don't want to overcook them because then they're going to get really, really crunchy. I personally like when they're a little bit gooey in the middle, but not so undercooked that they're not cooked at all. So about 10 minutes, but I would watch it depending on your oven as well. And that should be about it. And then you want to let them cool for at least a few minutes on a wire rack, or at least on this, before you move them onto a plate, before eating them, because they're going to be really hot and we don't want you to burn your mouth.
Yeah. And also, if you try to move them too early, they might break apart because they're still pretty warm from being in the oven.
It's also important to remember that when you take cookies, or most things actually, out of the oven, they will still cook for a few minutes on the cookie sheet. Well, that's why we say to leave them for a few seconds, so they feel like they're about to break apart, or they look like it, but it's still golden around the edges and it looks soft in the middle. They will cook while you're taking them out, so that's why you don't want to leave it in there for too long either.
Oh, I'm excited to eat these cookies.
You can fit about one more after this, I think, on there.
Yep, you don't want to overcrowd your cookie sheet. Like we said, we don't want any cookies
I'm just gonna rinse my
joining
hands off.
into each other. Social distancing of the cookies, as you can see.
Oh, this is awesome. So these look really, really good. I hope these turn out really good for everybody who decides to try them. So we're gonna take these.
Oh, hold on. I'll wash my hands and then I'll show Jess putting them in the oven.
Perfect.
I do not want to get cookie all over my phone.
And so remember, make sure if you are doing these or planning to do these, make sure you ask your parents. We're gonna throw these in the oven now. So I'm just gonna slide them right in there, make sure I don't touch any part of the actual oven that's really, really hot. And this did just move over, not the way I wanted it to, so I'm gonna grab my oven mitt first before.
Well, how ironic. You have a snowman on your oven mitt and it snowed.
That's so true. So I'm gonna throw that right in there. Since the recipe calls for about 10 minutes, I'm gonna throw our kitchen timer on for 10 minutes. It might need a little more, it might need a little less. I'm probably gonna check it at about 8 minutes. But they're in the oven, and those are our cookies.
So before we sign off to make sure our cookies get baked, does anyone have any questions or anything about anything? We will be posting a picture of our cookies as soon as they're done, and Jess is going to make sure she posts the recipe that she's been following, so that if you guys want it written down, that you can look at that as well. And like we said, make sure you either comment on this or you send us a message, some things that you might want us to cook in the coming weeks. We picked an easy recipe for today just to kind of get you all started and get our cooking brains going.
Absolutely.
But we'd be interested in potentially doing some ones with some more ingredients or for different parts of the day, like maybe breakfast or dinners, instead of just a dessert. But whatever you want, just shoot us a message or comment on this post.
Also, make sure to check out Matt's wife posted a video this morning about a snow challenge. Definitely check that out because it should be really, really cool.
Yep, there's a lot of snow out there.
Yep. All right, thank you so much. We'll post our picture of our cookies in a little while.
All right, thank you for watching. Enjoy your cookies if you decided to try them.
Awesome.